I am very glad to talk to the diabetics of Australia. My fellow diabetics, I should say, because I have been one myself for the last third of a century, 33 years. I'm looking forward to completing my 50 before I'm bowled out. It was because diabetes took me up that I took up the study as my life work. This has been a great advantage to me in many ways, but because it brings more intimate knowledge, understanding, and sympathy, I hope, for my patients. Perhaps it's best to start off by asking oneself, what is the nature of this disease, diabetes? It's quite easy to understand for the layman, and I think I should go into a simple explanation. Of course, most diabetics know what it's about, but there may be friends, relatives, and indeed some general public listening to this talk. The nature of diabetes is best understood by comparing the body to a machine, which indeed it is in many respects. An engine burns coal to give it heat and energy. The human body burns food. That is its fuel for the same purpose. Of course, you don't see the smoke coming out of the human body, but it does all the same through breathing out through the lungs. The chief food that we eat are called the carbohydrates, sugar itself and starchy foods, all of which are digested in the gut into sugar itself. Glucose is the name we give it. When this sugar is absorbed in the normal person, it is burnt completely as fuel. The diabetic cannot burn this sugar. It circulates in the body in excess, increases the sugar content of the blood, the mouth, and so on, makes the mouth sticky, makes the patient thirsty. He drinks a lot, he passes a lot of urine. And in this urine, he loses the sugar which should have nourished a normal person. Besides, therefore, being thirsty, passing a lot of urine, he loses his food, gets tired, weary, and loses weight, although not all diabetics, as we shall see, lose weight. Now, that's what's wrong. This excessive sugar produces the symptoms of the disease, poisons the patient, makes him weak and thin. And why does all this happen? Although this disease, diabetes, was given its name 2,000 years ago by the Greeks, and indeed the symptoms were well described, we didn't know what the fundamental nature of the disease was until about 30 years ago. And now we know that the diabetic defect is due to the lack of the body's power to produce insulin. Insulin is a substance produced in that gland, the pancreas, the sweetbread, at the back of the stomach, deep in the abdomen, and its function is to burn sugar, all carbohydrate foods. This bit of knowledge obtained by research essentially on animals has completely revolutionized diabetic treatment and the diabetic's life. This insulin can be used to prevent all the symptoms, to restore health and make the individual normal. I'll come back to that in more detail when I talk of treatment. Now about the incidence of diabetes. Who gets it? Why do they get it? Well, it's a disease that occurs all over the world, at all ages, although it is much rarer in children and the young than in the middle-aged. As regards countries, they all have it. Australia the studies there have shown, seems to have a very high incidence of diabetes, and here in this country, it's put at 2% of the population. Now back to the treatment. For this purpose, we can divide diabetes into two groups, the mild and the severe. The mild are usually fat and middle-aged, and though they've got lots of sugar, they're not seriously ill. They still produce some insulin from their own pancreas. And the treatment is to restrict the carbohydrate food they eat so that their own insulin can deal with it and keep the patient well. The more severe types can produce no insulin of their own, and it's got to be given to them daily, once a day, occasionally twice a day, and this insulin has to be administered by injection. That is the main drawback that many people feel about this treatment. The treatment consists in eating so much carbohydrate food and in taking so much injected insulin to use and burn it up. It should be remembered that this balance can be upset in two ways. If you don't have enough insulin or too much food, excessive sugar remains. If you don't have enough food and too much insulin, too much blood sugar can be burnt up and the patient can temporarily feel weak, tremulous, and ill with that. Now, that's the best brief summary I can give you of the disease and its treatment. I just want to mention one or two other things. Before insulin, diabetics died. Their life was not worth much. It was thought that the diabetic was a useless person. And this prejudice still remains. The handicap remains of not getting life insurance, of being handicapped in employment, and all kinds of other ways. And in many countries, the diabetics have founded themselves together into associations of their own diabetic selves to look after their own interests. Diabetic associations all over the world. One is flourishing now in Sydney. Another is starting in Victoria, and so on. And this is of the utmost importance to the diabetic lay populace. I would like to see all of them join these associations and by their mutual support and help improve their own conditions, improve their own treatment, and remove the handicaps that they otherwise live under to a certain extent. That is a picture of the present position. But what of the future? Can we learn the exact cause of this disease? Can we be able to prevent it? Can we cure it? All over the world, in, I'm sure, thousands of laboratories, intense research work is going on in these points. And I think it is not too much to hope that in the next 5 or 10 years, so great will be the new knowledge acquired that if we cannot cure the disease, we may find a much better treatment, more simple, more helpful, and happier for the diabetic patient.